So, since I'm the last one, Chris said it's okay if I go for 45 minutes. I hope you're not hungry. So again, my name is Ben Shofty. I'm one of the neurosurgeons, functional neurosurgeons here at the U, and my work kind of focuses on the neuroscience of higher cognitive functions. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about traditional brain-machine interface, about network-dependent cognitive functions, about the default mode network, and about creativity as a network function. So, traditional brain-machine interfaces are focused on decoding motor activity and speech. This is one example from Elon Musk's Neuralink, and then there's a bunch of people who are working on decoding speech. There's also people that are working on encoding vision into the brain, and some people that are working on encoding sensation into the brain or the spinal cord. But you know, my question is that all who we are? This is one of my heroes. His name is Massimo Bottura. I like to cook, and I also like to eat. And he invented this dish, which is called "Oops, I dropped a lemon tart." So the thought of that level of creativity in the kitchen made me wonder, could we ever study creativity in the brains with the tools that we have as neurosurgeons? And everybody here knows that science begins with counting, right? If you can measure something, you can probably study it. But here's the challenge, how do we count something as elusive as creativity or higher cognitive functions, and how do we measure the dynamics of brain networks that kind of give rise to them? And our understanding of higher cognitive functions rests on the discovery of large-scale cortical networks. Unlike basic functions in the brain, like movement or speech, higher cognitive functions are probably encoded in dispersed large-scale cortical networks and not localized to a single cortical region. So these complex processes are probably network dependent. This is just an example of how brain networks looks like on fMRI, and I'm going to focus on the default mode network. And the default mode network is a very interesting neural ensemble, which is kind of responsible to that internal stream of consciousness that we all have. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing, but when you think about creativity in the brain, and this is an example of a person who took a lot of what we call lesioning studies, and basically put them on a single brain, and there are areas of the brain that if you create a lesion in them, then people become more creative, and there are other areas of the brain that if you lesion them, people become less creative. And these look, at least they look to me, as very similar to the default mode network, one of these large-scale cortical networks. So we kind of had the idea of where to look for this kind of elusive property inside the brain. And the way to measure creativity is, or the way we measured creativity, is we use the well-established task called the alternate uses task. And in this paradigm, we present the patient or the subject, participant, with an everyday object and ask them to come up with as many creative uses for them, or as one most creative use for them. And for example, if they if you present them with a cup, they can say, I can use it to build sandcastles, I can use it to plant a flower, I can use it to hold the door, right? These are all creative uses. If they say, I can use it to drink tea, then it's probably not as creative. And one way to measure it is through semantic distance, which can be automated, and then we can scale this thing up. And this is just one example or a couple of examples of the tools that we as neurosurgeons have. We have the unique ability to both directly stimulate the brain and record neural signals from multiple sites simultaneously. And this gives us kind of an unmatched spatial and temporal resolution, and most importantly, allows us to establish causality, which is something that's extremely difficult with non-invasive methods. I don't know if we have the sound here, but this is an example of us kind of stimulating the nucleus accumbens and getting a very robust, reward response in an OCD patient that we operated on here at the U. And as we said before, this is not rocket science, so hopefully the next few slides of data will be easily understandable. And the first experiment that we did was during residency, where we tried, we used patients undergoing awake brain tumor resection, and we stimulated the default mode network in these patients while they were awake during surgery and performed the alternate uses task. And we saw that basically in patients where we stimulated inside the default mode network, we were able to impair their creative ability. And patients that were stimulated outside of the default mode network did not show any reduction in their creative ability. So this is the first time that somebody actually have proven that there's a causal relationship between the default mode network and our ability to be creative. Here at the U, we use a slightly different model. We use patients that are implanted with stereo EEG depth electrodes for epilepsy monitoring, and we use these electrodes both to record and stimulate for multiple areas inside the brain. This is done in the epilepsy monitoring unit and not in the OR, so it gives us more time to run the experiment with far better patient cooperation. And these are results that we have from the U. This project was spearheaded by Ricky Rabinovich from my lab and in collaboration with Elliot Smith, who is a great mentor and friend, and luckily he's here so he can see this slide. And what we were able to demonstrate is that there's a specific neural pattern with increase in high frequency power and decrease in low frequency power inside the default mode network when people were trying to be creative, as opposing to when they did solved simple math questions. We were also able to show that there's a specific fingerprint or a neural biomarker for when people were able to be successfully creative. So when they were able to give very original or creative responses, we saw a very specific response or activation of the default mode network. And the last thing I want to talk about today is that the decoder that Ricky built. So as we said, one of the things that you need in order to generate or design a successful brain-machine interface is the ability to decode something, and Ricky was able to train a decoder based on these types and patterns of activation to allow us to basically decode when a person is trying to be creative based on these network activation signals. 6 minutes?
That's a little over 6 minutes.
Okay. Then, thanks everybody.